Hey guys, today I'll show you a science fiction thriller TV series named Fallout, Season 1. Spoilers ahead, watch out and take care. The drama takes place at a luxury villa on a mountaintop where a birthday party was underway. A cowboy invited to the event performed lasso tricks for the young birthday girl, silently enduring the host's sarcastic remarks, forced to bow to money. However, when the host asked for a thumbs-up photo, the cowboy firmly refused. He told his young daughter that when he served in the Navy, they used their thumbs to gauge nuclear explosions. If the mushroom cloud was smaller than their thumb, they had to run immediately. If it was larger, there was no point in running. They could only wait for death. As he finished speaking, a blinding white light flashed, and the buildings at the foot of the mountain were instantly reduced to rubble. Glass behind them shattered violently. The cowboy quickly hoisted the little girl onto his horse and was the first to flee. Several more nuclear bombs landed on the villa and mushroom clouds blossomed in the distance. The scene shifts to 219 years later after the nuclear bomb apocalypse. The surviving girl Lucy had grown up in Vault 33 and was now of marriageable age. She was applying for marriage within the post-apocalyptic organization. Lucy, sweet-looking, healthy, and excelling in all areas, was the ideal candidate for breeding. Unfortunately, most of the men in the shelter were somewhat related to her. To avoid inbreeding and producing deformed offspring, it was decided to arrange a marriage with Vault 32 next door. On her wedding day, Lucy meticulously dressed up, signing and dating her wedding dress. She had to use it carefully because the dress would be passed on to the next bride after her wedding night. People arranged the venue in a cornfield, their faces beaming with happiness, although the blue sky and white clouds in the background were merely a product of 3D projection technology. As soon as the hatch opened, she would see her future husband. Lucy felt both anticipation and nervousness. However, her cousin, who guarded the door, hesitated to press the switch, his face full of sorrow. It turned out Lucy and her cousin had already consummated their relationship, but as long as no offspring were produced, everyone turned a blind eye. Urged by Lucy, the hatch finally opened. Lucy's father, the shelter leader, exchanged pleasantries with the leader of Vault 32 and presented a generous dowry, finally securing a breeding partner for his daughter. Lucy was overjoyed to see her future husband's fit physique. They shared a gentle kiss, officially becoming husband and wife. Next, the families of the bride and groom dined together. Lucy's father gave a speech stating that surface radiation would soon drop to normal levels. By the time Lucy's child grew up, they could colonize the surface and change the primitive and violent ways of the surface dwellers. Everyone raised their glasses in celebration, singing and dancing in TikTok style. The newlyweds quietly left, eager to breed a baby for humanity's last hope. Lucy was lost in their smelly hormone yoga session, sweating profusely when a sudden chicken scream from outside broke her concentration. Instinctively, she grabbed a machine, trying to find any chicken but suddenly aiming it at her husband, realizing he wasn't from the underground shelter, but a raider from the surface. Before she could escape for her sexy life, he gripped her neck, slamming her into a cabinet. As her ears rang, he drew a knife and advanced menacingly. Lucy struck back with precision, seizing the knife, but the strength difference was too great. Soon, he overpowered her, plunging the knife deep into her abdomen. Distracted by an alarm, the man looked away, giving her a chance to grab a glass and slash his handsome face. Pulling the knife from her greasy abdomen, she injected herself with a hemostatic and pain relief agent and rushed to the armory, only to find the guns gone, leaving just a tranquilizer gun. The wedding venue had turned into a slaughterhouse, with the cornfield stained red by the diabetic blood of friends and family. One raider shoved a gun into a cousin-in-law's mouth, and the bullet that exited his skull killed 2 caterers. A pregnant woman, clutching her husband's corpse, lunged at the raider, losing an eye in the struggle but managing to grab a machine gun and fight back. Someone tried to escape to the next chamber, but was gruesomely bisected by the closing door. Lucy had just rescued her timid and frail brother when her disfigured husband attacked her. Luckily, her father arrived in time, smashing the raider's head with a shovel and then drowning him, sending him to meet his ancestor. After the bloody battle, most of the shelter's residents were either dead or injured. The survivors were taken captive. The raider leader, Moira, forced Lucy's father to choose between the safety of 6 residents and his daughter's life. Without hesitation, he chose the latter, locking Lucy in a secure, explosion-proof room. However, Moira did not kill Lucy's father. Instead, she sedated him and took him away, craving his big muscles and remarking how much Lucy resembled her mother. As their footsteps faded, a ticking bomb began to sound, and the remaining residents fled for their shitty lives. After the bloody midnight, dawn always comes. The surviving residents disposed of the bodies in the compost chamber and worked together to clean the bloodstains from their home. Lucy quickly stitched her wounds with a stapler and rallied everyone to go to the surface to find her father. The residents were disappointed by her leader father and unanimously rejected her plea, insisting that protecting the shelter was the top priority and that the door to the outside must remain closed. However, Lucy refused to give up. With the help of her cousin and brother, she sneaked into the elevator. Her cousin decided to go with Lucy. Just as he spoke, he was tranquilized. Her timid brother, too afraid to take risks, could only offer a farewell hug. As the hatch slowly opened, Lucy walked resolutely outside, facing the wind and sand, passing through fields of human bones, and embarking on her courageous journey to find her father. The scene shifts to the Brotherhood of Steel, which is a training base governed by the church. Young soldiers train for years, hoping to one day be knighted and officially become honored squires. Max, often ostracized, frequently faced beatings from his comrades during self-defense classes. He was also not very capable, failing even to recognize circuit diagrams. The instructor mercilessly slapped him in front of everyone. Suddenly, a shadow loomed overhead, and a spaceship landed in the center of the base. The Steel Knights disembarked, exuding an imposing presence. Among the crowd, Max gazed at them longingly. After class, his sidekick friend took him to the warehouse to sneak a peek at the Knights. They grew up together like brothers, vowing to one day enter the battlefield side by side. Unexpectedly, the sidekick friend was knighted by the church first, and would soon head to the wasteland to fight, while Max remained at the base, cleaning latrines. Jealous and furious, he vented his anger on the latrines. The next morning, a piercing scream echoed through the dormitory. Someone had hidden a blade in the sidekick friend's boot, severing his Achilles tendon. The comrades accused Max of jealousy-driven sabotage. The bald bishop flexed his bald head before coldly demanding the truth from Max, who evaded the question, his eyes shifty. The bald bishop reminded Max that the Brotherhood fought for humanity's honor and were heroes against enemies, but were weaklings if they harmed their own. Max's eyes welled up with tears. Though he did not confess, his tears betrayed him. He swore loyalty to the bishop, claiming he was willing to sacrifice his life for humanity's cause. The bishop sighed and handed Max the position originally meant for the sidekick friend. In truth, Max got the position because his sidekick friend vouched for him, insisting to the bishop that Max was innocent and too kind-hearted to hurt a fly. Seeing the sidekick friend's loyalty and righteousness, one can only wonder what Max felt in his heart. The knighthood ceremony arrived quickly. Knight Titus branded Max's back with a red-hot T, standing for Titus's group rather than Tesla, which formally sealed their contract. Max was now pledged to fight alongside Titus, swearing to protect him at all costs and to be his most loyal squire. Their first battle was imminent. Max and the knight were tasked with capturing the notorious criminal, a bespectacled man named Wilzig, and his accomplice, a dog. It's said that the criminal carried a powerful item, one capable of either destroying or saving a nation. Completion of this mission was crucial, and Max received the criminal's portrait. As the mission commenced, Max struggled to keep up, laden with heavy gear, trailing behind the knight. He pushed himself to the limit to match the knight's pace. As the fighter jet gradually distanced itself from the base, Max's face beamed with excitement and anticipation. The scene shifts to a trio of outlaws who reached a secluded graveyard. Legend had it that beneath one of the graves lay a mutant who had survived for centuries. The group's leader ordered his two lackeys to dig up the grave. When they pried open the coffin, all three were so terrified they forgot to breathe. Out emerged a ghoul wearing a cowboy hat. The ghoul is a living creature mutated by radiation, rather than killed by it. His desiccated, twisted flesh and missing nose made him look like a skeleton. The ghoul picked up a chicken the trio had prepared. If he devoured the chicken's head, he would be a bloodthirsty monster that needed to be killed on the spot. Seeing the ghoul remain motionless, the leader hastily proposed a deal, saying that Wilzig was now a nationally wanted criminal with an unimaginably high bounty. If the ghoul joined them, they could catch Wilzig easily. When the ghoul showed no interest, the leader immediately threatened to bury him back in the grave. In a flash, the ghoul bound him tightly with a rope, dodged bullets with a swift turn, and then shot one of the lackeys in the head. The leader was buried alive in the grave, while the chicken remained unharmed since it had not offended the ghoul, who spared its chicken life. It's revealed that Wilzig, originally a professor, had secretly implanted the world-altering item into his brain. He planned to carry out a covert operation but was caught by a colleague. During their struggle, his loyal dog leapt forward and bit the colleague's throat, killing him. Realizing he was now a fugitive, the professor fled, becoming a nationally wanted man. During his escape, Wilzig encountered a sleeping Lucy with a giant cockroach slowly approaching her. Thankfully, his dog intervened just in time, saving her life. Overjoyed to see another human, Lucy anxiously asked if he had seen her father. Recognizing Lucy as a vault dweller, the man realized she was unaware of the surface world's dangers. Giant cockroaches were merely the lowest tier of radiated monsters, and many more unimaginable bloodthirsty creatures lurked in the shadows. He warned Lucy to return to the vault, the last sanctuary of humanity and the safest place. Seeing her determination to find her father, he reluctantly vanished into the darkness. Wilzig and his dog walked through the night, utterly exhausted. Just as he intended to eat a can of food and rest, his dog emerged from a nearby cave with a severed hand. Horrified, he stared into the dark cave from which a beastly roar echoed. Before long, Max and Knight Titus arrived outside a cave. They saw a white robe and empty cans on the ground, with fresh dog droppings nearby. It seemed Wilzig and his dog were close. The knight ordered Max to scout deeper into the cave. Trembling, Max ventured inside. It was empty and dark. Meanwhile, a mutated bear silently approached the knight from behind, its sharp teeth tearing through his gun barrel. The knight engaged in close combat but stood no chance, retreating in fear. Max hesitated to fire his gun, not wanting to draw the bear's attention and put himself at risk. Soon, the bear had the knight on the ground, biting him viciously. Max realized he couldn't wait any longer. If the knight died, the bear would turn on him next. He fired several shots at the bear's head. The knight, now severely injured inside his armor, had all his limbs torn off. He urged Max to fetch a healing syringe. Seeing Max's unhurried pace, the knight cursed him, accusing him of desertion and vowing to report him to the church for the harshest punishment. Hearing this, Max placed the syringe back in his pack and coldly stared at the knight. Once the knight died in agony, Max stripped off his armor and donned it himself. The cold machinery didn't recognize its owner. Now, Max became Knight Titus. He planned to capture Wilzig himself. Excited by the thought, he picked up a stone and threw it several hundred miles, marveling at the armor's power. Suddenly, he heard cries for help. A man was being beaten by a burly figure. Max rushed over, grabbed the attacker, and the victim taunted the attacker while praising Max as a hero before running off with a suitcase. Max realized he had saved a shameless thief, but he didn't care. He was too absorbed in his heroics to notice. Meanwhile, Lucy climbed over a hill and arrived in Philadelphia. She showed her father's photo to everyone she met, but they were all indifferent. At a grocery store, she noticed many vault supplies and suspected the owner of dealing with raiders. She asked for the contact of their leader, Moira. The shopkeeper's eyes filled with hostility, telling Lucy to get lost with her heavy body. It turns out that after the nuclear explosion 200 years ago, the wealthy and powerful hid in vaults, leaving ordinary people to suffer on the surface. They despised vault dwellers like Lucy and wouldn't help her. Dejected, Lucy left the store and ran into Wilzig, who again urged her to leave the surface. This time, he revealed she was from Vault 33, which grew corn and had a 3D projector. Stunned, Lucy asked how he knew so much about the sealed vault. Just then, the ghoul emerged from the crowd, aiming to capture Wilzig for the bounty. He shot the man's foot, crippling him. The shopkeeper called on nearby hitmen, offering 1,000 coins to kill the ghoul. Seeing the hitmen ready to attack, the ghoul acted first, shooting one through the heart and taking out 2 more with a single bullet. The air filled with the stench of blood. Snipers shot at his back, but he felt no pain, calmly reloading and killing 2 snipers before shooting the shopkeeper in her greasy leg. As he approached Wilzig, the loyal dog defended its master but was quickly killed. Hiding in the store, Lucy searched for a contact list. Hearing the man's cries for help, she couldn't ignore it and bravely stood between them, politely asking the ghoul to spare him. When he refused, she shot him with a tranquilizer dart, but it had no effect. At that moment, Max descended from above, landing heroically before Lucy and removing his helmet for a dramatic gaze. This was his moment to shine. Wearing his bulletproof armor, he charged the ghoul, sending him flying like a Barbie toy. Lucy and the shopkeeper seized the chance to rescue Wilzig, fitting him with a mechanical leg despite the gruesome process. For the shopkeeper, the man was just cargo, needing to be delivered for payment. Wounded herself, she couldn't escort him. She then asked Lucy to help, revealing that the client was Moira, who had taken her father. Wilzig was a valuable bargaining chip, possibly enough to trade for her father. Lucy eagerly agreed, and the shopkeeper quickly input the destination coordinates, urging her to leave immediately. As soon as Lucy stepped out the back door, she found herself face to face with Max. She gave him a shy, admiring smile. Max, feeling flustered and distracted, prepared to take off and show off a bit. But unexpectedly, his leg got stuck, and the ghoul cut the lines on his armor, causing it to lose control. Unable to attack, he had no choice but to fly away in an attempt to escape. The ghoul swung a rope, knocking him into the air, and the armor completely lost control, crashing heavily next to an outhouse. When the ghoul entered the grocery store, everyone had already disappeared. He noticed the dog was still breathing and injected it with a healing syringe. The wound stopped bleeding instantly, and the dog, now full of life, had a new master in the ghoul who had saved it. By the next morning, Wilzig and Lucy had left Philadelphia with 20 miles remaining to their destination. Every step the man took was excruciatingly painful, and he could no longer bear the suffering. Quietly, he swallowed a poison pill. In his final moments, he called out Lucy's name, asking her to cut off his head and deliver it to Moira, because it contained something that could change humanity's fate. Lucy was puzzled. She had never told him her name. How did he know? Just as she was about to ask, the man passed away, ending his bespectacled life. Lucy hesitated, looking out over the endless wasteland. Hauling a corpse could take forever, but carrying just a head would be much easier. Taking a deep breath, she gripped the saw in her hand. In a flashback, several nuclear bombs fell from the sky, turning America into a desolate ruin. Radiation spread globally, marking the beginning of an apocalyptic world where humanity struggled to survive in extreme conditions, often resorting to mutual slaughter. 200 years later, many humans had turned into ghouls, and numerous animals had mutated into giant monsters. Those who retained their conscience had to endure a hellish existence. The scene shifts to an actor who once played a Western cowboy, had a sweet, happy family with a loving wife and a daughter. After a nuclear attack, he became an ugly ghoul. For over 200 years, he survived on a yellow potion, but now he only had 3 bottles left. He urgently needed to obtain Wilzig's priceless head to exchange for more potion. Lucy, holding the head, knew it was her only bargaining chip to rescue her father. After much deliberation, she inserted a tracker into the head's nose. This way, even if she lost it, she could find it again. Max, the squire from the Brotherhood, had killed Knight Titus and damaged his armor. Now he was in a tight spot. The base contacted the knight through a pager, and Max had to lower his voice to impersonate Titus, falsely reporting the squire's death. To his horror, they decided to send another squire. Terrified, Max smashed the pager. With no time to lose, he had to repair the armor. After much effort, he finally extracted the damaged part. Repairing it required 5 coins, but he only had 4. Desperately, he sold 2 teeth to make up the difference. Returning joyfully to the armor, he encountered a group of greedy thieves. Despite his efforts, they outnumbered him and beat him up, leaving him on the ground. If he lost the armor, he couldn't complete his mission, and the Brotherhood would certainly execute him for killing the knight. Determined, he grabbed an iron bar and fought his way to the armor. Even after being beaten to a pulp, he didn't give up. Seizing an opportunity, he shoved his hand into the armor and crushed a thug's head. The others, terrified, fled immediately. Suddenly, a Brotherhood fighter jet flew overhead. Max quickly assembled the armor and hid inside. To his shock, the new squire was his old bully, Thaddeus, from training days at the base. Fearing exposure, Max considered killing him but felt a sense of superiority seeing his former tormentor groveling like a servant. Max threw his codpiece to Thaddeus, ordering him to clean it. Thaddeus complied without a hint of resentment. Feeling pleased, Max decided to keep him around for now. Having a squire made things easier. He could carry equipment and provide food and water. Knowing the ghoul was also after Wilzig's head, Thaddeus pulled out a radiation detector. Following the radiation trail, they could find the ghoul and, ultimately, the head. Lucy had made it to Hollywood Boulevard with the head in tow. she navigated around the lake, aware that just beyond it lay the meeting point. Entranced by a cute deer by the lakeside, she moved to feed it when suddenly a massive creature burst from the bushes, snatching the deer in its jaws. As Lucy approached to investigate, the beast grabbed her too. In a panic, she fired her gun, causing the creature to release her, but it swallowed the head in one gulp before diving back into the water. It was a mutated fish monster. Luckily, Lucy had installed a tracker in the head. If she could kill the fish monster and cut it open, she could retrieve the head. But before she could even take off her clothes, a ghoul arrived. Lucy was turned into bait and thrown into the water to lure the monster. After several torturous attempts, they only caught a few mutated small fish, which the ghoul tossed to his dog. Lucy, in unbearable pain and itching, realized the water was toxic and pleaded with the ghoul to stop, but he showed no hormone mercy and dunked her back into the water. Finally, the fish monster took the bait and was pulled ashore. Up close, Lucy saw that the monster's mouth lacked sharp teeth, but was filled with dense, pink, finger-like structures. In her moment of shock, it bit her leg. The ghoul tried to spear it, but was knocked to the ground. Lucy grabbed his bag and struck the monster, managing to free her leg. The dog rushed to help, biting the monster hard, which caused it to retreat into the water. The ghoul, inspecting his bag, found that all 3 of his potions had been smashed. Enraged, he considered killing Lucy, but then thought better of it, realizing she might still be useful and that the fish monster would digest the head slowly. Lucy, uncertain of her fate, noticed the loyal dog still by the lakeside. It turned out the head belonged to the dog's former owner, and to protect him, the dog was ready to abandon its new ghoul master. On the other side, Thaddeus was refilling the armor's water supply and chattering away, trying to bond with the knight. When he asked how the previous squire, Max, had died, the real Max inside the armor felt a murderous impulse. He coaxed Thaddeus into speaking ill of Max, ready to kill him at the slightest insult. But Thaddeus surprised him by saying Max was a good person. Before Max arrived at the base, Thaddeus had been the target of bullying. To escape his plight, he led the bullying against Max to fit in, following the brutal rules of the wasteland where only the strong survive. Now he felt only guilt and regret. Hearing Thaddeus's confession, Max's eyes welled up with crocodile tears, and he decided to let him live a bit longer. They continued their journey and soon reached the lake, where the radiation detector started beeping. Analyzing the water, they concluded there must be a mutated creature within. Suddenly, the fish monster attacked from a distance. Max could have sent Thaddeus to face it, like Knight Titus would have done, but instead, he pulled Thaddeus back to shore and faced the monster himself. As he ran out of bullets, the fish monster leaped from the water. Thaddeus diverted its attention with timely gunfire, but the enraged creature charged ashore, swallowing half of Thaddeus in one bite. Max grabbed Thaddeus and pulled with all his strength. The fish monster stubbornly held on, but eventually its entire stomach was ripped out, spilling its contents as it died. Among the debris, the loyal dog guarded its former owner's head, and both men were overjoyed at their discovery. The cowboy ghoul and Lucy had been trekking through the desert for a long time. Thirsty, Lucy begged the ghoul for water, but he drank it all, mockingly suggesting she drink the nuclear waste around them. As they passed a shelter sign, Lucy gave a faint smile, prompting the ghoul to shoot the smiling mascot on the sign. But the mascot, thumbs up and dressed in a protective suit, was actually the ghoul himself. Over 200 years ago, he was the first to wear such a suit, serving as the spokesperson for the shelter company, with his wife standing by his side. The memories were vivid, yet the world had changed beyond recognition. The scene shifts to Vault 33 holding a trial. Lucy's cousin, who had opened the door for her, had been demoted and was now tearfully red-eyed. Lucy's brother, Norm, had been punished with prison guard duty. The vault's interim overseer had just taken office and was keen on implementing benevolent rule. He planned to rehabilitate the raiders in the prison, instilling them with moral values and imparting knowledge. Norm coldly remarked that they were all murderers who deserved to pay with their lives. His statement sparked discontent among the residents. Just then, a man rushed into the hall with a water chip, announcing that the water recycling system was completely broken and that their water reserves would only last 2 months, less if they included the prisoners. The meeting ended abruptly. The one-eyed woman quietly approached Norm, agreeing with his stance that those who killed her husband must pay the appropriate price. A roar echoed from within. The cowboy ghoul was pushing Lucy inside, where they saw another ghoul writhing in agony. He had once been a surgeon and was a longtime friend of the cowboy ghoul. It seemed he hadn't taken his yellow serum in days and was about to turn feral. The ghoul put a bullet through the surgeon's head, then extracted his unbrushed teeth, consumed his marrow, and cut off his buttocks for rations. Lucy was horrified and accused the ghoul of cannibalism. She reminded him that Vault 33 had once suffered a plague, and despite being starved to the bone, no one resorted to eating each other. Her father had always taught her to uphold human dignity no matter the circumstances. The ghoul laughed, calling her father a liar who might have led the cannibalism himself, using human flesh to survive the plague and then erasing that dark chapter from history. He handed Lucy a knife, demanding she cut the diabetic meat herself. If she refused, she would starve to death. Lucy hesitated but took the knife after only 2 seconds. Fresh buttocks meat hung from her bag, ready to be dried into jerky. Lucy, parched and on the brink of dehydration, realized the scarcity of fresh water on the surface. Most people had to drink nuclear wastewater to survive. With no choice, she drank her first sip of wastewater. The ghoul laughed, but soon started coughing violently. Seizing the moment, Lucy tried to escape, only to find a cliff ahead. As she sought another route, a lasso ensnared her, and the ghoul dragged her back, pinning her sexy body down, but not for a hormone yoga session. Lucy bit his finger hard, and in retaliation, the ghoul cut off one of her fingers, following the wasteland's golden rule of an eye for an eye. Eventually, they arrived at the supermarket. The cowboy ghoul used a walkie-talkie to arrange a trade. Lucy for 60 bottles of yellow serum. The other party wanted to inspect the goods first, and the ghoul agreed. But as soon as Lucy was inside, the ghoul collapsed. He was already on the brink of mutation. Cheerful music played in the supermarket. A friendly robot approached Lucy, warmly offering to treat her wounded hand. It selected the freshest finger from a collection and used a laser to weld it onto her hand, effectively restoring her functionality. Grateful, Lucy couldn't help but vent about the ghoul outside, describing his inhuman treatment and her fear of becoming a mere tool for pleasure. The robot immediately rebuked her, saying her thoughts were disgusting and perverse. It only wanted to harvest her organs. As it finished speaking, it shot a tranquilizer dart at her. Meanwhile, Lucy's cousin was thinking of her, unable to eat or sleep. The two had a marital relationship but were forced apart. The one-eyed woman visited, bringing her late husband's belongings for Lucy. After dressing the items on Lucy's cousin, she couldn't help but notice how much he resembled her deceased husband and initiated a tongue massage. It was his first time with a pregnant woman, feeling both awkward and somewhat excited. Her husband's portrait watched over them, and suddenly, the one-eyed woman's labor pains began, her water breaking. Norm arrived to find the one-eyed woman in labor and his cousin still wearing the dead husband's clothes. Ignoring the personal matter, he took the cousin to Vault 32, where prisoners had hinted at a significant secret. Finding nothing in the computer system, Norm decided to investigate Vault 32. The crops were dead, diabetic blood was everywhere, and the corpses had turned to mummies. The last signs of life had been detected 2 years prior, though the raiders had only invaded days ago. Clearly, the inhabitants hadn't been killed by the raiders, but had turned on each other. A bloody message on the wall read, "We know the truth." In the archives, they found the interim overseer dead in his chair. It turned out that the residents of Vault 32 had killed all the management and opened the door to the outside world. Norm accessed the communication system and discovered that the door had been opened from the outside with a key card by none other than Norm and Lucy's mother. Lucy dreamed of her long-deceased mother. Her mother's voice gradually brought her back to consciousness, and she found herself surrounded by ghouls in glass cages. She was pushed before 2 bosses who decided she was worth the 60-bottle price, instructing the robot to start organ removal. Just as the circular saw touched her skin, the anesthesia wore off. Lucy flipped off the table, grabbed a stun gun, and disabled the robot. Holding a poison dart, she threatened the bosses to release all the ghouls. Terrified, they opened the cages. Seeing a few ghouls still trapped, Lucy fired a dart, and the bosses had no choice but to comply. However, those last few ghouls had already turned feral, driven by bloodlust. Lucy dodged into a corner as the feral ghouls attacked the bosses, tearing out their chicken throats before being gunned down. Watching both sides perish, Lucy felt lucky. Suddenly, she heard a goose roar behind her. An old ghoul repeating her name looked just like the surgeon from the West End clinic. As she put the old ghoul down, Lucy finally understood the cowboy ghoul's struggles. Even those who seemed despicable had their sad stories. Their ruthless actions were driven by the sheer will to survive. Lucy approached the ghoul, declaring that her new golden rule was to repay evil with kindness. She believed that while one's appearance could change, humanity should never be lost. After saying this, she left a few bottles of medicine behind and walked away. The ghoul stared at the yellow liquid, feeling a mix of emotions. He quickly downed a few bottles and rushed into the supermarket to restock supplies. By chance, he came across a television and a tape of a movie he had starred in. Back then, he was the most famous cowboy in the West, known for a classic line: "No matter how ugly a person is, they should live with strength and dignity. Without dignity, one might as well be dead." The armored knight heated his palm to brand Thaddeus with the honorable squire's Max. They had just completed an important mission. Returning with the head of their target would make them heroes in the Brotherhood. However, inside the armor was actually Max, who had killed the real Titus. Max confessed to Thaddeus, hoping they could agree to lie about Titus's death. Thaddeus, loyal to the knights, refused. Max saw no option but to silence him. During the chase, Thaddeus's foot was crushed, but he endured the pain, circled behind Max, and removed the fusion core from the armor. Trapped inside, Max was left to his fate, while Thaddeus took the head and returned to the Brotherhood alone. At dawn, giant bugs approached, attracted by the smell of flesh, ready to use their mutated fangs to penetrate helmets and feast on brains. Fortunately, Lucy arrived in time, shooting each bug dead and stomping the last into a pulp. Familiar with T-60 armor, she quickly freed Max. But before they could speak, Lucy collapsed, likely suffering from radiation sickness. Max, carrying anti-rad meds, saved her life. Their mutual rescues built a fast trust relationship. Lucy told Max she had installed a tracker on the head and her wristband keycard could navigate to it. She suggested they team up, promising Max the head after the mission, in exchange for his knights helping rescue her father. Max was hesitant because he was an imposter and had no choice but to agree, as Lucy's navigation card was crucial. He continued to impersonate Titus. As they walked, they saw a couple in the distance. The strangers claimed to be harmless, weaponless civilians. Max quickly recognized the lie, whispering to Lucy to draw her gun and shoot when they got close. But Lucy, believing in the goodness of people, insisted on friendly conversation, suggesting everyone raise their hands in trust. As they passed, the couple smiled wickedly and attacked. Max swiftly retaliated, killing them but not before being shot in the arm. The couple belonged to the Devil's Gang, known for cannibalism. On the surface, such gangs were common. Born and raised in a secure vault, Lucy was naive to the dangers of the wasteland, focused only on bringing her father back to the safest place she knew. Unbeknownst to her, the vault was far from safe. At this moment, Norm and his cousin had just uncovered the secret of Vault 32. The residents had revolted, killing the management, and blood had spread all the way to the door of Vault 31. The control panel was stained with blood, suggesting they had desperately tried to enter Vault 31 before their deaths. To unravel the mystery, Norm hacked into the computer system and discovered that all past overseers had come from Vault 31, including his own father and the newly appointed Betty. The election was over, and the interim overseer didn't receive a single vote. Everyone had unanimously voted for Betty from Vault 31, just like an old saying in the vaults went, "In times of crisis, vote for Vault 31." Norm visited his cousin's house and suddenly remembered that his cousin's newlywed wife, the one-eyed woman, was also from Vault 31. He cautiously asked her what made it different. She gave him a chilling smile, saying the mashed potatoes there were especially good. Meanwhile, Lucy and Max had arrived in Sandy Shade City. Once the capital of the new California Republic, it was a flourishing hub with a population of about 34,000. But a new series of nuclear attacks had turned it into ruins. Lucy couldn't believe it since this wasn't in her history books, but she had to believe Max, who had witnessed it. Unfortunately, Max didn't know who had destroyed his home. Knights who came to clear the battlefield had rescued him, and he had been in training at the base ever since. As they talked, Lucy noticed Max was bleeding heavily from his gunshot wound. Feeling guilty, she rushed into the vault's medical lab to find a first aid kit for Max. Max followed her in, but Lucy had vanished, and the door behind him automatically closed. A cloud of knockout gas filled the room, and they both lost consciousness. They woke up on stretchers in Vault 4. Lucy looked around and smiled in relief. This was her home. At the same time, Betty had initiated an immigration plan, arranging for some residents to move into Vault 32. Norm noticed the bodies had disappeared, and the blood on the walls was freshly painted over. He couldn't help but wonder why people had turned on each other, who used his mother's key card to open the vault, and why Betty was covering it up. He confronted Betty, asking whose hands the key card was in. Betty hesitated, saying the keycard was buried with his mother, a burial she and Norm's father had performed together. Meanwhile, doctors in Vault 4 were treating Max's wound, extracting a rotten tooth bullet from the inflamed gunshot. They recommended rest. Since Lucy and Max were from the surface, they had to stay in quarantine for observation. With nothing to do, Lucy invited Max to breed, but he frowned and refused, calling it disgusting and unworthy of a knight. As days passed, Max grew suspicious of the residents' fake smiles and strange behavior, feeling like they were in a cult. He wanted to escape, but Lucy reassured him that the people were friendly and urged him to follow medical advice and recover. Their deformed overseer, with one eye in the middle of his face, visited to give them instructions, emphasizing they must never go to the 12th floor. Observing their surroundings, they saw residents with horns, deformed hands, and titanium blue eyes. Shockingly, the deformed residents were all original vault inhabitants, while the normal ones were from the surface. This eerie vault had a connection to the cowboy ghoul. Over 200 years ago, before the nuclear apocalypse, the cowboy ghoul was still human, named Cooper, a top Western star. He had been invited to endorse the Vault Tech company and filmed an ad in Vault 4. The ad's release led to a surge of fans buying slots in the vault, generating huge profits. A celebration ensued, with society's elite gathering at Cooper's home. His wife, a high-ranking Vault Tech official, was all smiles, but Cooper was melancholic. He felt the ad was deceitful, fearing the apocalypse was just scaremongering and the vaults might never be needed. His memories were interrupted as the ghoul awoke to find himself arrested by officers for damaging government property. As he was being taken away, his thoughts drifted back to the past when a strange machine appeared in his home, which his wife called the Vault's keycard. Those who paid for slots were merely lower-class residents. Only those who fully committed to the company could live in the management's vault. Before long, Cooper was having a heartfelt conversation over drinks with an old friend. His friend mentioned that capitalists had already taken control of most of America. They were building vaults on a grand scale, almost wishing for the apocalypse to arrive sooner. Only by destroying the world would the vaults prove useful. After saying this, he handed Cooper a business card inviting him to a secret meeting. The next day, Cooper's wife informed him that he needed to say goodbye to their dog quickly. The higher-ups had just implemented a new policy. Dogs were no longer allowed in the vaults. Cooper was deeply displeased. He questioned who made such rules, feeling that he had worked hard for half his life to pursue freedom. He couldn't understand why he should follow someone else's ideas and live a meager existence in an underground tin house. As he pondered this, the ghoul was led into a dilapidated wooden hut. Inside, a fat man who was eating human flesh claimed to be the president, causing the ghoul to chuckle. They were old acquaintances. Knowing the ghoul was not to be trifled with, the fat man untied him. The ghoul then pulled out a needle and thread, focusing on sewing his severed finger back together. The two chatted and bantered, but a lackey nearby, trying to impress, beat the ghoul and told him to watch his mouth. The ghoul headbutted him, killing two lackeys in the blink of an eye, then shot the corpses a few more times in a fit of rage. He then tore down a wanted poster of the raider leader Moira, examining it closely. To his surprise, Moira didn't look the same as she did 200 years ago. On the other side, the residents of Vault 4 found Max's armor, and he was delighted to discover that the fusion core in the energy room could power it. Despite their kindness, he repaid them by attempting to steal it but was caught red-handed. Instead of raising the alarm, they handed him a room card, assigned him a cabin, and encouraged him to try adapting to normal life. Max was deeply moved. The smiles of the residents began to thaw his frozen heart. He went to his new home, took his first hot shower, and savored food he had never seen before. It felt like paradise. Unlike the gradually adapting Max, Lucy had many doubts. She bluntly asked the overseer why they couldn't go to the 12th floor, startling him so much that he spat out his hot cocoa. With a stern face, he told her to get lost with her heavy body. Things grew even stranger when the surface dwellers held a bizarre event. They stripped off their clothes and worshipped the Queen of Flames. The flickering candlelight illuminated a blood-red banner. The so-called Queen of Flames was none other than the raider leader Moira, who had taken Lucy's father. The ghoul's memory must have been faulty. Moira hadn't changed a bit in 200 years. Lucy rushed to Max, babbling about the cult-like ritual and calling the residents mad. She insisted they leave immediately, but Max had fallen in love with the vault and refused to believe her smelly bullshit. He wouldn't leave no matter what. In a moment of impulsiveness, Lucy ventured to the 12th floor alone, desperate to prove she wasn't lying. As soon as she entered the tunnel, the hatch closed. Using her card, she opened a secret room at the end, finding countless glass jars filled with human limbs. She approached a TV, where a woman submerged in a glass tank was giving birth. Swarms of piranhas swam out of her, devouring her and her smelly part instantly. Lucy continued to explore deeper and found a cryogenic chamber with pregnant women in stasis. Shocked, the lights suddenly came on. She quickly hid in a corner and saw a horned man enter. Planning to sneak out, she accidentally made a noise. The horned man pressed the alarm and picked up a weapon. Lucy had no choice but to fight for her life, throwing acid in his face. A large group rushed in, capturing her tightly. It's uncertain if a horrific human experiment was awaiting her. The scene shifts to a father and son were scavenging for lead bullets in the endless wasteland. After a long day, they finally earned enough money for their living expenses. As the father entered the house, calling for his daughter, he received no response. He then saw a ghoul eating meat and feared his daughter had been killed, feeling a mix of sorrow and terror. The next second, his daughter walked out of the kitchen. The father's heart finally settled. He knew that the ghoul wasn't a reckless killer. He asked what the ghoul wanted, promising to answer truthfully. The ghoul looked at the younger son and revealed a blood-stained letter, stating that his brother had already been shot through the heart by the raiders, and he came to seek revenge. If they didn't reveal the whereabouts of the Queen of Flames, Moira, they would meet the same fate. To buy some time, the younger son said that Moira was at the observatory, but had no intention of letting the ghoul leave alive. Just as he reached for his gun, the ghoul shot him in the heart. This creature, who had lived for around 200 years, always sensed the killing intent in others' eyes. The old father and young daughter, who only wished for a peaceful life, were naturally not on his kill list. The ghoul's name was Parker. 219 years ago, he was human and had once met Moira. That day, he attended a secret meeting at a friend's invitation. Moira, the leader of a mysterious organization, delivered a passionate speech, claiming that America had been thoroughly corrupted by capitalists. They said atomic bombs could end wars, but that wasn't true. Once fired, only the common people suffered, while those in power remained the source of their misery and their greatest enemy. Realizing it was a revolutionary group, Parker immediately stood up to leave. Moira called him back, saying she knew his wife's secret. Intrigued, Parker listened and learned that his wife's vault company was aggressively buying fusion cores and using business tactics to annex numerous research companies. Moira had just invented something to end wars, but it was seized by the Vault Company. It was clear that the Vault Company was the most warlike faction. To achieve world peace and protect humanity's common interests, Moira hoped Parker would help. She then handed Parker a bugging device, asking him to discover his wife's true nature. Back to 219 years after the nuclear explosion, Lucy discovered that Vault 4 was filled with human experimentation devices. Unfortunately, she was caught. A videotape was playing in front of her, showing a researcher leaving a final message to the camera. The door behind him burst open, and a hybrid monster stormed in, swallowing the researcher whole. After the video ended, the overseer looked a bit emotional. He told Lucy that the hybrid monster was actually his great-uncle. Many years ago, Vault 4 was controlled by a group of administrators who conducted human experiments on the residents, which was why the overseer was born deformed. Eventually, the residents united to drive out the administrators, searched for survivors around the vault, and slowly built a friendly and stable community. That shameful history became a taboo, unknown to new residents. Now that Lucy had broken the taboo, she had to face the harshest punishment. As soon as he finished speaking, Lucy was taken out of the interrogation room. Max saw his companion being captured through the window and decided to rescue her at any cost. Meanwhile, Thaddeus had been walking in the wasteland for a long time with Wilzig's severed head. He was exhausted from carrying heavy gear and dealing with the loyal dog that followed the head. The most pressing issue was the infected, foul-smelling wound on his foot, which was both painful and itchy. Unsure how many days he had left to live, he had to abandon the gear and lock the dog in a metal box to move faster. The cowboy ghoul accidentally found Thaddeus's blood trail and discovered the trapped dog. Deciding to take the dog along, he believed it could sniff out its owner, leading him to the head. Lucy, who also wanted to seize Wilzig's head, was now on trial, surrounded by onlookers. She thought she would be executed on the spot, but to her surprise, the overseer cut the rope on her hands with a machete. The so-called harshest punishment was actually letting her go. For these kind people, sending a girl back to the wasteland seemed too cruel. To ease their guilt, they even prepared 2 weeks' worth of supplies for her. As Lucy stood there in a daze, Max stole a fusion core to power his armor. Without a word, he launched a frenzied attack on the residents. People fell like raindrops, the sound of breaking bones accompanied by a romantic BGM, creating an eerie scene. Lucy hurried to stop him and Max froze, awkwardly muttering an apology. After leaving the vault, Lucy demanded that Max return the fusion core. Without it, the backup power in the vault would only last a few days. Max was reluctant, arguing that without the armor, it would be nearly impossible to retrieve Wilzig's severed head and save Lucy's father from the bandits. Lucy insisted that a thief didn't deserve to be a knight and that she didn't want to use harmful means to save her father. In the end, they returned the fusion core. As they heard words of thanks, Max smiled faintly. This incident made Lucy fall in love with Max, and she confessed her hormone feelings. She knew that love was different from the urge to reproduce. She just wanted to be with Max, come what may. Max, who had grown up in the cold Brotherhood, also fell for the kind-hearted Lucy. Through her, he felt the warmth of human connection. He revealed a secret he'd buried deep inside. He wasn't actually a knight of Titus, but a squire. He had deliberately let the knight die from his injuries and then stole his armor. Lucy understood that Max must have had his reasons. In the wasteland, everyone's hands were stained with blood. She didn't care about his past. She only knew that the Max she saw now was kind, and she wanted to face the future with him. As they embraced without a tongue massage, Thaddeus was already walking into the desert with the severed head. He encountered a wandering doctor and followed him to a makeshift clinic, where he handed over the fusion core as payment for medical treatment. After drinking the potion, his festering foot began to heal, and his high fever subsided. He was ready to head to the radio tower near Shady Sands, but worried about the high radiation. The doctor gave a sinister smile, saying he needn't worry about radiation anymore. Before long, Thaddeus reached the radio tower and contacted the Brotherhood. He was leisurely enjoying the music when a friendly man struck up a conversation with him. As they chatted happily, Lucy and Max arrived. Thaddeus quickly raised his gun and fired, but his aim was terrible. He emptied his clip without hitting anything. Lucy and Max, unarmed, didn't dare approach. Thaddeus, stepping back, triggered a trap and a flying sword pierced his neck. Realizing he wasn't dying, he understood he'd been tricked by the doctor and had become a ghoul. As the sound of approaching fighter jets grew louder, Thaddeus knew the Brotherhood wouldn't tolerate ghouls and was at a loss for what to do. Max seized the opportunity to take the severed head and urged Thaddeus to flee. Once Thaddeus was gone, Max handed the head to Lucy, hoping she could rescue her father. He planned to take a fake head back to buy her time. With little time left, they shared a lingering kiss, turning all their feelings into a tender farewell. Meanwhile, Norm had poisoned the prisoners in Vault 33, but the overseer Betty didn't punish him. Instead, she kept him at Vault 33 during the relocation. The people assigned to Vault 32 bid a tearful goodbye to the home they'd known for so many years. Only the one-eyed woman smiled, as if she had always known she would become the overseer of Vault 32. Norm suspected that the one-eyed woman and Betty were hiding something. Both women came from Vault 31, so he decided to start his investigation there. He sneaked into Betty's office, hacked into the Overseer's communication system, and successfully contacted the Overseer of Vault 31. Pretending to be Betty, he claimed the mission hadn't been completed on time and arranged to return to Vault 31 immediately. When the hatch opened, there was only a long, dark corridor with no one to greet him. Norm cautiously walked to the end and was stunned to find that the overseer of Vault 31 was a human brain encased in a machine. Meanwhile, Lucy arrived at the observatory with Wilzig's severed head. Contrary to her expectations, it didn't resemble a raider camp at all. The fields were full of corn, and everyone she met was friendly and polite. On closer inspection, she realized they were all homeless people, including ghouls she had saved. She approached the leader, Moira, with the head, pleading for her father's release from the cage. Moira took the head calmly and began to recount a brutal history, saying that 219 years ago, the Vault Tech company held a major meeting. Besides the company executives, a large group of capitalists was also invited. By then, almost all of the spots in the vaults had been sold. The wealthy became official residents, while the powerful became administrators. Ordinary people on the surface were to be wiped out by nuclear bombs, and surprisingly, Vault Tech was behind the bombings. They had devised a long-term plan. The vaults were stocked with centuries' worth of supplies, enough for people to live for over 10,000 years. Whenever a new civilization emerged on the surface, it would be subjected to another nuclear attack. The vaults were intricately interconnected, with every three forming a unit. Most administrators entered cryosleep for long-term control. Vault 31 was a massive cryogenic chamber, while Vaults 32 and 33 were breeding pools. Only a portion of the administrators would wake up at a time, and when they died, brain robots would automatically awaken new administrators to fill the vacancies. The most perverse part was that administrators could manage the inhabitants of the breeding pools however they saw fit. In one vault, overpopulation led to cannibalism to select the fiercest individuals, like breeding venomous creatures. Another vault was entirely managed by robots, while others conducted genetic experiments to create monsters, allowing only the smartest children to reach adulthood. These twisted individuals were plotting to monopolize the world, unaware that Parker had installed a listening device on his wife's keycard. He was in her office, overhearing all the outrageous plans through the bug. Lucy's father was also present at the meeting and personally received Parker. What's more, Moira told Lucy that her mother was a wonderful and intelligent woman. When she discovered that the vault's water was being drawn from outside, she realized that civilization had been rebuilt on the surface. But when she told her husband, he scolded her. Sensing that he was hiding secrets, she fled the vault with her children and started a new life in Shady Sands. Soon after, her husband found them, ruthlessly took the children, destroyed the city, and turned her into a ghoul. The feral ghoul before Lucy was her mother. It turns out, Wilzig's severed head contained the cold fusion technology that could end the war. Moira had captured Lucy's father only to obtain the activation code for the cold fusion. With his true nature revealed, Lucy's father hysterically blamed his wife, saying she had brought the children to a dangerous place and everything was her fault. Perhaps the bond between husband and wife was broken, but his love for Lucy was genuine. He hoped Lucy would help him open the iron cage. With tears in her eyes, Lucy coldly demanded the activation code from her father. Just as the cold fusion activated, the sound of approaching fighter jets grew louder. It's Max who had led the Brotherhood to the observatory. History was repeating itself. Perhaps a lifelong lover had brought invaders. No matter the time, humans always drew boundaries, finding grandiose reasons to wage war. Even if the world was rebuilt, war never ceased. Soldiers and knights fought, jets rained bullets indiscriminately, and the sounds of explosions and screams were deafening. Lives were being rapidly extinguished. When the knights breached the observatory, a whistle sounded in the dark. The ghoul had once worn T-40 armor and knew its weakness beneath the chest plate, so a single shot caused the armor to malfunction. Gunfire lit up the darkness, and one by one, the knights fell. In the chaos, Max reached Lucy and quickly freed her father. Lucy, unwilling to hide the truth from her lover, revealed that her father was the mastermind behind the destruction of Shady Sands and the reason Max was an orphan. She left the decision of his fate up to Max. While they spoke, her father somehow acquired a suit of armor and knocked out Max. The ghoul followed in, gun in hand, demanding to know the whereabouts of his family from Lucy's father. Relying on the armor, he didn't answer and flew away. The ghoul deliberately let him go, intending to catch a bigger fish and uncover the true mastermind behind the vaults. With the Brotherhood about to occupy the observatory, Lucy had to leave immediately with the ghoul. Before departing, she ended her mother's suffering since the feral ghoul was no longer her mother, but a soulless, bloodthirsty husk. When Max woke up, Lucy was already gone. The cold fusion was ready. Severely injured, Moira pressed the button and the surrounding buildings lit up, reigniting humanity's hope. She gently held Lucy's mother's hand and softly said they did it. As soon as the words left her lips, she closed her eyes forever. Max stood there, stunned, processing everything. Before he could fully grasp the situation, the Brotherhood swarmed in. He was hailed as the hero who killed Moira, on the verge of becoming the greatest knight. But he silently wept, unable to smile. A ghoul wearing a cowboy hat, a girl in a radiation suit, and a loyal dog set out on a new journey. What are the rules of the wasteland? Is it the law of the jungle? Survival of the fittest? The answer is no. Those who carry love and courage in their hearts are the true rulers of this world and the hope for the apocalypse. This is Daniel CC Movie Channel. Stay safe and enjoy your day.